D. James Kennedy Ministries presents Truths That Transform.
From the top down, our government has demonstrated a refusal to acknowledge the Islamic motivations behind terrorist attacks. When none dare call it Islam, what is our duty as Christians?
This is Truths That Transform.
Thanks, Frank.
On the other hand, we in America. Right, God's design for education.
Welcome to Truths That Transform, a viewer-supported program. I am Frank Wright, president of D. James Kennedy Ministries. In recent months, America has endured terrorist attacks on our own soil. In Orlando, Florida this summer, a jihadist killed 49 people in a nightclub. In a mall in Burlington, Washington, a Turkish immigrant who had become increasingly radicalized in recent days shot and killed 5 people. And in September, a naturalized citizen from Afghanistan planted multiple bombs in New York City and New Jersey, injuring 29 people before being captured in a shootout with police. Yet in each case, government officials, local, state, and national, initially denied any Islamic connection and then hastened to distance the crimes from Islam when even jihadist motives were discovered. On today's program, we'll take an in-depth look at radical Islam, the danger it poses to you, and the consequences of the government's insistent denial on this issue. We begin with someone who has taken a bold stand from within Islam. Dr. Zuhdi Jasser is the founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy and a former lieutenant commander in the United States Navy. As a moderate Muslim, he is calling upon the U.S. government to take seriously the jihadist threat. I recently had a chance to sit down and talk with Dr. Jasser in Washington, D.C. Well, welcome to our program. It's a delight to have you here. You know, I look at and I hear a lot of critical comments about the failure of sort of average Muslims to address the actions of radical Islam. You've not been afraid to level that criticism. Why have you been motivated to speak out about it?
Well, I have to tell you, it's sort of a calling, if you will, an understanding that, having been the son of Syrian immigrants who escaped the Assad, the Ba'athist regime of the 60s, which then became the Assad regime. Right. My parents embraced Americanism from the moment they stepped off the airplane. They became Americans, patriots who loved this country and understood the need to separate church or mosque and state. Right. And not internally in their values, but in government and the threat of Sharia law in government and the threat of organized theocratic Islam, but also the threat of autocratic socialist fascist regimes like in Syria.
Right.
So in many ways I was raised in a family that got it, that understood that the American experiment was the solution. I think many Muslims get it, but in many ways also the leadership, the organizations in America that represent Muslims are part of what I call petro-Islam. Yes. They are funded by Saudis, Qataris. They're funded by a theocratic element that wants to control our faith community. They are trying to obstruct reform. And Islam is in that time in history right now where we're sort of in the 15th, 16th century, and we've not gone through an enlightenment, a modernization, if you will, a rejection of theocracy, and that government is not God, that individuals have a right to have a personal relationship with God. So most Muslims, I think, haven't gotten there in their mindset. They don't understand Western freedom. And that's why I think we have a challenge and a responsibility. Even though there's only 3-4 million Muslims in America, we have the best laboratory to do this work of reform.
When Germans did speak up in the face of the Nazi regime, there were consequences. Have you sensed or had any sense of being threatened by being so vocal about with your criticism?
We have been threatened. I'm threatened on a daily basis, not necessarily death threats all the time, but certainly ostracization, marginalization. My family
Right.
constantly pays a price for what I'm trying to do. And I do it from a position of tough love, but yet the antagonists out there, all these Islamist groups that are part of this global political movement of political Islam, what I call Harakat Islamiyya in Arabic, which means Islamic movements that are like the Muslim Brotherhood, the Jamaat Islamiyya, ISIS, Hamas, all these groups. In America, they exist in a nonviolent way, but still reject secularism, and they view our ideas as toxic. They know that left to our own devices, when we debate them head on, we beat them. Muslims reject theocracy when they realize how to embrace their faith without pushing it through government.
Your parents, when they arrived, it sounds like they had an understanding that Sharia law was in conflict with the Constitution of the United States. Is that how you see it?
Absolutely, and that's why I do this work. Our American Islamic Forum's mission is not counterterrorism. That's a tactic. It's like saying if you were against the Nazis, you're counter blitzkrieg. You know, the reality is that we are pro-freedom, pro-liberty. The mission statement is to defend the U.S. Constitution and liberty through the separation of mosque and state. And it says we reject institutionalized Sharia. We reject, and this is the oxygen of Sharia. It's the Islamic State.
Yeah.
We reject not only ISIS, but all Islamic states. Because once you have an identified Islamic state, then it has to have Sharia in government. It has to have blasphemy laws, apostasy laws, because rejecting the faith becomes sedition against the state.
Right.
Until Muslims get democracy right, liberalism, classical liberalism right, we're going to continue to have this clash of civilizations. Jihadists will not be defeated by the American military. It won't happen. We can't kill 30% of the world's Muslim population that believes in violent jihad, which is how high those numbers are. So what do? You have to reform the oxygen that they breathed from, which is end and put into the wastebasket of history the concept of Islamic State and its jihad. Once you do that, the world will be freer and safer.
As Dr. Zuhdi Jasser just explained, the oxygen that jihadist Islam runs on is the notion of establishing an Islamic State. This indeed is the meaning of the name ISIS, Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. Yet the Obama administration has persistently ignored or even denied these motivations. Later in this program, we will share a vital resource with you that exposes the politically correct attitudes on Islam that run rampant through the Obama administration and the so-called mainstream news media. After all, how can we protect ourselves against an enemy whose goals we ignore because of political correctness? Ignorance of radical Islamic beliefs is putting Americans in danger. Christians are being persecuted and killed, even at this very moment, under radical Islamic regimes. We need to know the truth about radical Islam. And Dr. Kennedy shares it with us in this excerpt from his message, Days of Patriotism.
Most people really, until recently, had very little knowledge about the Islamic faith, and certainly did not consider it as any real threat. But I might remind you that Islam, Muslims, have on a number of occasions attempted to destroy Christianity. I suppose if I asked someone to tell me what those were, there'd be very few that would stand to the occasion. But I might say to you, if you go way back, hundreds of years ago, their first attempt to take over Christendom and Christian Europe went through what we now consider the eastern side of Europe, and their armies went all the way up to the borders of Germany, where finally they were stopped. But they didn't give up. They then went to the other side of Europe, to the western side, and made a second attempt to take Christian Europe. And there they made it all the way across northern Africa They crossed into Europe. They made it all the way to the center of France, and it was only there at Tours when they were stopped by Martel, and known as the Hammer. He stopped their advance. Otherwise, they could very well have taken not only Spain, but France and possibly Germany and England. But they weren't through yet. They also made an attempt directly to take America, probably before Christopher Columbus ever heard of it. They sailed out into the Atlantic Ocean. They went several hundreds of miles out into the Atlantic Ocean, and finally they were stopped by whom? By the hand of God Almighty. And there was a great storm that swept in on the Atlantic and sunk all of their ships. So they decided to take it directly. They decided to go right across the Atlantic Ocean and find out whatever it was that was over here. They got a few hundred miles from the European shore, and again, a huge storm swept down upon their ships and sank them all. It appeared that God did not want them to take over Europe or Christian America. But now we have come to a place again where they're giving their lives to take America, Europe. There are those who believe that in the next few decades that Islam will have taken over France and Germany and England. Yes, my friends, this is a very serious encounter that we're having now with the Islamic faith. And you've seen something, as I've just told you, about the commitment that they have to do precisely that. And yet we have many in America whose answer to this problem is very simple. It is cut and run. That wouldn't do it then, and it won't do it now, my friends. We need patriots like Charles Martel, the Hammer, and all of the other Christians that fought so diligently to protect Christianity from the ungodly. We need patriots. We need patriots that are willing to stand up and be firm with those that would do their very best to destroy this country. And I believe that such do exist. And I believe that America is not going to cut and run. I believe that we are going to take our stand in our time, and that we are going to defeat the plans of the ungodly.
Ignorance of the goals of radical Islam is leading America and many other Western nations into grave danger. The Obama administration and our mainstream media go out of their way to separate Islamic violence from Islam itself. Why do they do that? And how does that increase the danger that you and your family face? Our own John Rabe is the author of the book None Dare Call It Islam, and he joins us now. Hey, John, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Frank.
Is it too much to say that the connection between radical Islam and terrorism has been whitewashed in our media culture? And has that been going on for some time?
I think it's perfectly accurate to call it a whitewash, and it does even predate
the Obama administration. We see going back to all the way to the early 2000s when you had the so-called Beltway sniper in Washington, D.C. Well, he was a radicalized Muslim who changed his name to John Muhammad, and yet when he was being captured, the media kept using his given name and skipping past the Muhammad. Well, why was that? It was a desire to disentangle radical Islam from the crime. Then we saw it, of course, in the Fort Hood shootings, which the government classified as workplace violence. The Obama administration wanted to claim that this was just somebody who had been radicalized because he had secondhand post-traumatic stress, never having been in combat, but for having heard the stories of people in combat, he had a stress reaction. Well, the reality again was he had become radicalized, was in touch with radical imams, and shouted Allahu Akbar as he killed many of his colleagues. And then again, we see it with the Boston Marathon bombing. It happened on April 15th. And so initially the media kept saying, oh, it must be a Tea Party attack. It must be some sort of tax revolt. Well, once again, it was no Tea Party attack. It turned out, surprise, to again be radical Islam.
Well, let's take a look at how these efforts to whitewash radical Islam from its responsibility for terrorism take place.
If you take Islam and Islamic ideology off the table, as the media have done and as our government have done for the last 20 years, then you cannot protect yourself.
The American media is determined to whitewash Islam, to explain away every incident of Islamic violence, even when the perpetrators avow that they were doing it for Islam and under Islamic auspices. The Society of Professional Journalists adopted guidelines right after 9/11 that forbade journalists from speaking about Islam and terrorism together. And so that's why you see AP, Reuters, all the rest of them, they generally speak about militants, insurgents, that kind of thing. They don't speak about Islamic jihadists, even when it's an Islamic jihad.
And the media has been AWOL on Islam for 20 years. Americans don't know even what jihad means at this point. They don't know what Sharia is. I talk to people about Sharia, they look at me like I have three heads. They've never heard of it. For example, in 1993, we start out by saying, these people who bombed the World Trade Center are not representative of Islam, not representative of any mainstream Islamic ideology. They're a fringe element that have perverted Islam, lying about Islam. Now, that seemed at the time, I thought, to be a harmless fiction, but you keep doing this sort of stuff over the years, and then the next thing you do is you're purging everything that Americans need to know about Islamic ideology. You're taking Islam off the table.
These words have been leached out so that now if you say jihad in the American government, oh no, I'm sorry, that's a career killer. You just lost your promotion. If you say Islamic terrorism, if you put Islam and terrorism next to each other, or if you go against Sharia, if you go against the word Sharia, that's a career killer.
They've basically denied us the language to make people understand the conflict in this hallucination they're under that somehow Islam can be bleached out of Islamic ideology and Islamic terror.
John, it seems like the Obama administration has followed the media's path in this whitewashing effort. Why do they go to such lengths to try to disconnect what is obviously a clear connection between radical Islam and terrorism?
Well, that's really the big question, Frank, and it's been so strange to see the Obama administration just over and over again deny what's as clear as day. Each time one of these attacks takes place, President Obama stands up, someone from the administration stands up to say, this has nothing to do with Islam. ISIS has nothing to do with Islam, despite the fact that ISIS means Islamic State. It has nothing to do with Islam. Well, radical jihadism and terrorism is not a part of all of Islam, but it certainly is a part of a major segment of Islam that goes all the way back to the beginning of Islam.
John, this is a classic clashing of worldviews, isn't it? And of religious ideology as well.
It really is. And that, by the way, is why secular Europe has no answer to radical Islam, because secularism cannot deal with a committed religious ideology. Ultimately, we will need to address radical Islam from a military perspective. Ultimately, it is a security issue. But those things will not ultimately solve the problem of radical Islam. Radical Islam is a totalitarian ideology. The solution to radical Islam is the gospel of Jesus Christ. It is the gospel that tells us that Jesus sent his son to die for us in our place, rather than us having to send our sons to die for him.
John, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Frank.
Here's John Stonestreet from the Chuck Colson Center for Christian Worldview with a final word on the real answer to radical jihad.
Islam is a force on the world scene, and I don't think secularism, secular cultures have the worldview robustness, if I could say it that way, to handle the real threats of radical Islam. There's a kind of an inherent thought by most secular societies that religions will assimilate to us. We don't have to assimilate to them, and I think that's naive when it comes to Islam. But that said, as Christians, we still know that no matter what happens on the world scene, again, the center of history is Christ has risen from the dead. And I think that Christians need to not succumb to fear. There's a difference between being realistic and being fearful. And one thing I think we need to know right now is that God is moving remarkably in the Muslim world to bring Muslims to Christ.
Radical Islam is a clear and present danger in this world, and the denial of that fact by our own media and by the government whose job it is to protect us only increases that danger. We have an important resource to help you understand what is behind this willful blindness and how the problem of radical Islam must be solved. Here's my very special friend, Jennifer Kennedy Cassidy, to tell you more about it. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you, Frank. You only have to turn on the news to see how essential the issue of secure borders is. The current presidential election is virtually hinging on it. And there's widespread frustration in America because the current presidential administration seems to both underestimate the threat posed by radical Islam and refuses to adequately secure America's borders. This could prove to be a devastating mistake. Already, there's been an increase in domestic terror attacks, and each time, the media and the Obama administration attribute it to something other than Islam, even when the attackers clearly express their own jihadist motives. That's why you need to read the powerful book, None Dare Call It Islam, by our own John Rabe. In this book, you'll see just how far President Obama and the media have gone in avoiding the truth about radical Islam, why it's dangerous, and what the answer is to stop the spread of it. We'll send you the book, None Dare Call It Islam, as our thanks for your generous donation to the ongoing work of this ministry. Simply write to us at D. James Kennedy Ministries, Box 11154, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 33339, or call toll-free 877-962-7677, or go online to djkm.org. We need your help to continue proclaiming truth that the mainstream media avoids. We'll tell you the truth about radical Islam, and we'll also proclaim the cure, which is the gospel of Jesus Christ. But we need your help to do it. Please give a generous donation today, and we'll thank you by sending you the book, None Dare Call It Islam. Have you ever wondered why President Obama so frequently excuses the deeds of Islam while going out of his way to badmouth Christians? Not long ago, the president stood at his podium on Easter Sunday to criticize Christians just days after dozens of Christians were killed for their faith by Islamic radicals in Kenya. What could possibly explain such behavior? You need to read this short, vital new book, None Dare Call It Islam, to understand what's happening. We'll be glad to send it to you as our thanks for your generous donation. Simply write to us at D. James Kennedy Ministries, Box 11154, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 33339, or call toll-free 877-962-7677, or go online to djkm.org.
As author Richard Weaver once noted, ideas have consequences. The basic beliefs that you have about the nature of reality and the purpose of life will in many ways determine what you do. These are ultimately religious questions. One who trusts in God's gracious offer of eternal life in heaven through the person and work of Jesus Christ will behave differently from someone who believes God is virtually unknowable and that one can only secure His favor by acting violently on His behalf. Thus, we see dramatic and fundamental differences between societies created largely by believing Christians as opposed to those created largely by Islam. It is not a coincidence that the growth of medicine, education, equal rights for all people, science, and free enterprise have flourished in historically Christian-influenced societies of Western Europe and America, while the exact opposite is true of Islamic nations. But in our current politically correct environment, some argue it is deeply offensive to point out such basic facts. Instead, cultural relativism has reached the very highest levels of our government. How else to explain the astonishing statement from the head of NASA describing a directive he received from President Obama about Islam? He said, "President Obama wanted me to find a way to reach out to the Muslim world to help them feel good about their historic contribution to science, math, and engineering." Of course, no Islamic nation has ever put a human being into space, let alone on the moon. And there are, in fact, theological reasons why radically Islamic nations do not prosper in science. Chief among them is the fact that Islamic law discourages free inquiry, advocating the diminution of reason under a God who dictates every detailed facet of life. But that is of no import for the self-anointed, politically correct elites in our day. All cultures must be made to feel good, they say, despite the fact that truth, reason, and experience show us that some things really are better than others. This politically correct mindset is nothing less than the leveling of all things in the thin gruel of mediocrity. It is a quack prescription for cultural suicide. Dear friends, we who bear the truth must not let that happen. I'm Frank Wright. Thanks for joining us on Truths That Transform. We'll see you next time.
Next week on Truths That Transform.
What difference does Christianity make? The eloquence of his Christian life was credited with changing England.
One of the missions of the Center for Christian Statesmanship is to raise up a model of Christian statesmanship. What does Christian statesmanship look like?
That's next week. Today's program is available on DVD for your gift to this ministry of any amount. Please call, write, or log on to our website today. This has been a production of D. James Kennedy Ministries.